battery. Well, I'm down here in my downstairs, it's cool in the basement workshop. So today, I am working on the clock. I've already taken it apart. I've repainted the case. I repainted the reflector. It goes up next to the lens. Trim ring, whatever you want to call it. Got that taken care of. I ordered do-it-yourself clock conversion kit. I also ordered a new harness for the Rally-Pac that does the interconnect between the Rally-Pac and the car. About 200 bucks, which is quite expensive. I have fixed this clock several times, and I don't know how well you can see this or not, but this mechanism here, the winder, that whole mechanism, the winder has started finding its ground through the bearing at the bottom. It's completely shot. So this whole assembly moves around so the winder doesn't work anymore. In fact, right now it's not possible to set the time because everything is bound up inside the clock. It is worn out. So I just decided I was going to go for this. Get this out of the way now. Let's just see what we got here. Okay. Well, most importantly, what we've got is, boy, this little red notice. Yeah, it's just an advertisement. So these must be the instructions right here. Okay, first thing, most important, read the instructions, it says. Well, I find that most interesting. I wouldn't have got that message unless I was already complying. Okay, let's see what this little module looks like. Let's see, how does it come out of there? Just a little bit of it. There we go. So there's the clock module. So it is designed to use the case ground. So this just has to scratch ground. That's a little here and there, but the original clock, that's all it did. And then it comes up through the original terminal hole, apparently. This is a universal clock that fits a number of models. And so I have to determine which gears to use because we have black and red here. Decidedly have a different pitch and size to the gears. I don't know if you can see that very well, but red has a finer tooth count than the black does. Same with the idler, that is. It comes with new rubber bushings, which is good because on my clock here, the rubber bushings have all but disintegrated. Okay, so assumptions from the get-go is I have to use my face, my hands. I guess that's good because that way the clock will look absolutely original. I think I have to use the gears, all the gears that are driving the hands right here. It's either supposed to be these or I have to use the brass gears that are coming out of this. Anyway, I'll read the instructions and then I'll get back to you. Just some cardstock paper, and I cut the bottom out of Dixie cups and stuck them down to the paper, and then I can label each of these cups for what I want. And if you look at it, you'll see base, battery, speaker. Well, this is what I use when I'm doing iPhones. Read through the instructions, and it's time to get at it. I'm just going to put the harness aside for now. Basically, I've got to get it all apart, and the front dial and the parts behind it, everything down to this first joint there, everything above that, I have to reuse. So my first problem will be to get it apart and assess why the hands will not adjust. Hopefully that's down in the mechanism that's jammed and not up at the top of the parts that I'm reusing. That we'll find out when I get there. Okay, the instructions say to just use my thumb and forefinger, grab hold of this hub, and with a back and forth rocking motion, apply a little upward force, and the hand should just come off of there. Well, so far it's not even moving. So I must be puny. Yep, it's not even starting to come off. Okay, let's see. Let's see if we can think of something else here. Apply a little excess pressure. See, I can't bend any shafts or ruin any parts. So what I'm doing here is I just got my fingernails underneath there and I'm rocking back and forth. That worked. I'm going to use the same method on the next ones. Now these will come off a little easier because, as you can see right there, I don't know if you can see that or not, it's got a little split in the dial or in the hand. And each one's a different size naturally because each shaft has to run inside the other. Okay, hands are off as requested. Now, next step. Let's just get an X-Acto knife up here and see if I can slip that underneath that. Oh yeah, there we go. That's the ticket. See, so what I'm doing there is I'm just taking the X-Acto knife, putting it underneath that tab and just working it up, and then I can straighten that tab out. Just like that. Okay, there's the dial. So these little push-on washers, whatever you want to call these, they're like speed nuts. They're next. I'm trying to save these nuts, even though, if I'm not mistaken, they have a different style of nut, but speed nut for pushing on, but they do have replacements, but I'm trying to save these old ones. I suppose I don't have to take the time to do that, but I'm gonna. Okay. Boy, there's just nothing left of that. So that whole thing's gonna have to be cleaned up. Just crud everywhere. Now it says, now even though I read these instructions, I don't have them memorized, so I'm going to have to keep referring back to them. Remove the electric movement, which I did. Separate the movement from the dial plate, keeping the movement upright, which I did. Remove the hour wheel. Beginning the disassembly of the gears and whatnot, they come off in a specific order because they're kind of just stacked on top of each other. Can't really do it wrong. Now I have to count the teeth so I can pick which gears I'm going to use, either red or black, when I reassemble the clock. You got to mesh up the pitch of the gears and everything. There was a little confusion because these instructions are kind of worded backwards, or just at least not in a linear forward fashion. Check out the gearing on the dial plate assembly that is engaged when pulling out the set stem. Okay, that's this here. Make sure the gears rotate freely. If not, well, they are not freely rotating, they are gummy. So it says clean them. Okay, I'll do that. More alcohol. Check the gear studs to ensure firmly in place. Rock the studs with a screwdriver. If loose or broken, send to the factory for repair. I would not do that, and if broken, I'd make new ones. They're just brass. I just turn them on the lathe. Putting the clock back together, install the 3 grommets on the dial plate, pushing in slightly smaller diameter side to be opposite of the movement. Alright, I need to put these into something that I can access. So once again, I need another container here. So the trick there is just to make sure that it's fully in the groove. Done. Pay close attention to the minute wheel assembly. Refer to the troubleshooting section and follow the instructions under problem can't set the time prior to installing the minute wheel. Okay, that's totally not right. First problem, I have the minute wheel and the length of the shaft does not, for the second hand, does not protrude beyond the minute hand. Over here it says just to install the second hand. They don't say anything about the fact that you can't get at the second hand to install it. That has to be this brass thing right here. That has to come out. I don't know, maybe they figured this brass part would come off with the hand. You know, the hand came off of the brass, but maybe, in theory, the brass part was supposed to come off with the second hand. I don't think so. I can't get it to budge.
I was afraid that I was just going to snip that shaft right off.
No, believe it or not, I think it came off of there. It did. Wow. So I think that's what was supposed to happen. When I pulled the second hand off and it was being really difficult, this brass piece was supposed to come off with the second hand. The tool has to push on this outer rim and not up on these fingers. So it just needs to engage the outer rim, and it's got kind of a little cup to it. So they're talking about using a socket, but that seems like it's going to be way too much in diameter. Plus, it's not round. It's either 6-sided or 12-sided. And it's not going to fit down in there right. So I'm going to go see what I have to get that to happen. All right, back from my quest. What I got was, this is an old piece of an antenna. It fits the little nut perfectly. Now, my next problem. When I'm pressing these speed nuts on, I need a way to support these plastic pieces. See, like this nut here is cantilevered over the edge here. So this one's like pretty close, as is that one. But this one is cantilevered, and there's no way to support it from the back except by grabbing it like this. In fact, I think I'm going to try to put that one on first, because I just may screw up the whole dang thing right now. Let's see what happens. Well, I got it to just barely start engaging. So if I have to tighten them up more, I will. They have a couple of criteria. One is that the motion wheel post should be just clearing the back of the dial plate. Get them all in here. There we go. All right. So before I do that, I'm just going to, I don't know if I can set the time or not. We're going to find out here. Doesn't feel like it. Nope, I can't set the time. So that means that minute wheel still has too much friction on it. Dang it, that means the whole thing has to come apart again. Yep. So the deal is, with these plastic gears, you want almost no friction on that minute so that it can slide when you set it. I mean, it has to have some friction or it won't keep time, but I can't be forcing these plastic gears under that kind of pressure. Yeah, that's just not going to work. That means the whole clock has to come apart. I have to figure out how I'm going to get those nuts off of those plastic things without ruining the movement now. Oh gosh, I got that one off. Of course, now the next question is, will I be able to get them to stick again? You know, if it bends them too much. So all I'm doing is I'm using my X-Acto knife and just trying to relieve the pressure of the springs. So it's a little tedious. Take it just a little bit at a time. There we go. That's 15% of original. Okay, so let's put that back on. And I'm going to pull this off and see if one of these washers, we have two different diameters here. Let's see if it'll fit. It's only going to pick it up maybe 15 thousandths, but I'm going to leave it in there. Okay, motion wheel.
The order is the minute wheel, the orange motion wheel, and the hour wheel. If your clock came with the washers, do not include them when you're putting it together.
And I suggest you do this too. Check that you can set the time. There we go. Okay, that's good. Okay, save. So don't make that mistake. Make sure 15% of the original drag. It has almost no drag coefficient at all. If it's freewheeling, that won't work because the gear has to be able to drive the hand. But it can't have anything more than just a cursory drag. I don't even know how to describe how light that drag is.
As you put the speed nuts on, you have to compress the rubber grommet a lot, and I mean a lot, to where you think you're smashing it more than it should. And be very careful not to break any of their plastic or to support it from a piece where it might break something. It's just tedious.
Yep, it works. Okay. Back to it. So the thing about a project like this is the devil is in the details. Every little thing has to be just so. Bend these more than once. If I were to try to loosen and rebend those, they would just break off and I'd end up having to glue the dial into place. Okay, so now it's time for the hands. I make sure that I put them on at noon or midnight if you prefer. You know, you'll have the minute and the hour hands synchronized. Okay, there we are. We are all synchronized. Now, next order of business, before I go any further, is to drag out my 12-volt supply. So there's my red. I can clip that on right there. There's ground, and that clips on right there. Now, all I have to do is turn it on here. Supply some 12 volts just by pulling the little insulator out of there, and
Now, it is normal for the clock to run backwards and then take off and run forwards.
there it goes.
I have to say, this really does look great. This clock hasn't ran in a long while.
We'll just zoom in there a bit. So I will now assemble it.
Assembly is pretty straightforward. The only problems I had was, number one, here I had to put the clock in and then let it scratch where the paint was inside, and then take my screwdriver and clean the paint off of the inside where the ground had to make a connection. And then one of the other issues was that the rear post is, the terminal is just a little off center. You saw me point at it right there. It's a little off center, and it kind of puts a little torsional force on the clock This is something that I'm actually worried about. I'm going to run a bunch of tests and keep track of it. At this point, you're going to want to clean the lens real thoroughly. And one thing you don't want to do is flip on your lights and get to look at one of your thumbprints on the inside of the thing. Hey, there's the voice of experience. You also want to be careful when you crimp those little ears over when you're done, because it's pretty easy to crack the lens. You'll notice that there's a groove on the side of that housing that allows, if you hold it just right, it just guides the screw right down into the hole. So it's not difficult to get those screws in, even though they're way recessed down in the cavity there. Okay, so here I'm hooking up the wires. The little anti-shake washer goes against the terminal, then the wire, then the nut. And be aware that the light, wire for the light, is crimped over pretty close there as it comes out of the back of the housing. It has to bend to get routed out through the hole. And my wires were brittle enough that they cracked, and I ended up having to put heat shrink on it. All right, so now it's assembled, and you can see I'm showing how the wires are supposed to be routed. On my Rally-Pac, I took the extension cover off and put that little rubber pad on there. And because I like my Rally-Pac slid down against my instrument cluster, so I don't need that long extension to hide the wires. Okay, so here I am wiring it all up to make sure it works. And there it goes. Well, almost. Okay, there it went. Notice it ran backwards first. And there it is. Everything is lit. The clock is running. It's really great. The Rally-Pac is complete.